Hello everyone, my name is Rhys Kościński. This is Simple Philosophy, where we simplify philosophers to help you better understand life. Now, in today's video, I thought I'd try something just a little bit different. Now, obviously with the new year being upon us, a lot of people were, again, making these kind of rap tier lists. Other YouTubers do them and they're quite popular on Twitter. But as I was searching through them, I actually found one created by J Fraser1 on Twitter, which is actually a list where you can rank philosophers. So I thought, just while I'm having a coffee break, I'd have a bash at trying to organize these philosophers via the tiers that has been created here. So as you can see, we've got a list of philosophers, or a bunch of philosophers' faces below. And I don't know if you're like me, but I'm really bad with faces. So normally, because I live in a small village, people say, "Oh, you all right, Rhys? You all right? How's it going?" And I'll just kind of go, yeah, because I have no recollection of who they are. I'm sure I usually do when I get home, but I'm really bad at remembering faces. So hopefully we are okay with the faces, and at least we should be, as we've seen them many a time. But I tend to be more focused on philosophy books more so than what the philosophers look like. Anyways, the tiers that we've got here is the top tier, which has been ranked as great and groundbreaking work. We've got great but derivative after that. We've got good, mediocre, and then we've got poor and garbage. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to judge these, but I'm going to take a look as we go along and make judgments as we piece them together. So let's start with the first philosopher on the list here. So I think this is an image of Frantz Fanon, who of course wrote the book Black Skin, White Masks as a key kind of cornerstone of post-colonial study, I believe. I have read that book. It was a while ago since I read it, though. Now, in terms of how are we going to judge this? So, in terms of influence, he obviously has been quite influential on post-colonial studies, and of course, philosophies for understanding identity and things like that. I think I'm going to place him on the good tier list. Maybe we'll adjust this as we go forward. Now, the next philosopher that we have, it looks like Schopenhauer. Now, Schopenhauer is someone I encounter in my everyday life every day. I always wake up every morning and remember his famous quip that today is bad and every day it gets worse until the inevitable. I also quite liked his passive-aggressive lifestyle, where he used to buy 2 meals for his lunch, one for himself and the other so that no one would sit next to him. So based on that, that's quite amusing. But in terms of his work, he's certainly very influential, and he was quite influential on psychoanalysis too. Would I say he was groundbreaking? I guess every philosopher, well, the majority of philosophers are groundbreaking in a way. Would I define him as derivative? Probably not. I think we can put him in, I don't know, because some nihilist philosophers are pretty good. He's rather nihilist, rather pessimistic. I think we can place Schopenhauer in the good tier list. I remember this quote that's along the lines of, if life were full of meaning, you would never be bored, or something along the lines of that. So the next one is Baudrillard, and of course we've done a video on Baudrillard on the page. I also teach him quite a lot in my lessons where I work. So Baudrillard simulation simulacra would be the main piece. I'd probably say is particular. Is it groundwork? And it's certainly very influential. Is it derivative though? Has he copied other people? I don't know. I think in terms of the postmodern condition, he's pretty good. Personally, probably not. I think personally we can put him on the good tier too. So next we've got Camus, probably one of the more handsome philosophers that we can discuss. Now, obviously, Camus done quite a lot of philosophical work. He also wrote book as well, and obviously the Sisyphus argument, which is that one must imagine Sisyphus happy. A little bit of optimism there. For me, I do like Camus, but he does kind of blend into the other existential philosophers. So I think for me, I'll probably put him as great but derivative. So he can have that handsome chap that he is. So the next one looks like Hume. Hume, of course, being a Scottish philosopher, one of the kind of promoters of empiricism as various other ideas. I'm not really a big fan of empiricism per se. I did discuss it in the Kant lecture with Sean. That said, I understand he's been very influential, but personally, I don't know. I kind of think Hume's, I'll put him in the kind of mediocre category. Although that's probably a little bit harsh, but we'll put him there for now. And we'll see if I change my mind. Now, the next one, I definitely know who this is. Now, this is Jules de Luz, and I am a big fan of Jules de Luz. In fact, if we take a look at my bookshelf, I've probably bought the majority of his books. So those are like the main works. And then they were pretty hard to like grapple with. I then bought subsequent works by de Luz. And again, he's still a tricky philosopher to get hold of, because before I could really understand him, I had to go back into all of these older philosophers so I could grasp what he was talking about and what he was discussing. Certainly very influential on modern philosophy and thinking about desire and psychoanalysis and things like that. Groundbreaking, maybe not so much. He's rather impenetrable as well. So I remember getting like 1,000 Platos, and it's really difficult to read. So here's my copy of it, 1,000 Platos here, and we can see it kind of like drifts along. I actually kind of prefer Anti-Oedipus to 1,000 Platos, even though this has got its own merits, and this tends to be the one most people cite. I actually think it's a reasonably difficult read. But that said, you kind of dip in and out of it, which is kind of cool. It's like they describe it like a record. But for me, I much prefer Anti-Oedipus. I think I'm going to put de Luz on the great but derivative, as I guess he's not really derivative. I guess he argues that he's taking other philosophers from behind and then interpreting it in his own way. So I think on that argument, we can afford to put de Luz there. Now, the next one is Derrida, of course, for all the Jordan Peterson fans, the main enemy of the day. Derrida gets a lot of critiques about like postmodern politics and the liberal politics of the moment, but I actually think Derrida contributes quite a lot to the philosophy of language, kind of understanding of hauntology, and hauntology has taken on its own kind of meaning in recent years. Derivative, I guess he kind of lives within Heidegger and other philosophers, so I guess we can call him great but derivative. We can put him there. Is he groundbreaking? I don't know, and I wouldn't really say he was groundbreaking. Now, the next one is, of course, Freud, father of psychoanalysis. Of course, de Luz wouldn't be very happy with him because obviously desire, his interpretation of desire is based on lack. But in terms of starting psychoanalysis, that's pretty groundbreaking. A lot of Freud's theory are still slowly, or certain parts of Freud's theories have been slowly proven by scientific psychology. So I think it would be fair to place Freud in the great and groundbreaking category. I think that's fair. Now, the next one is Michel Foucault. Obviously, you know I'm a big fan of Foucault. We've done some videos of him on the channel. Would I say was groundbreaking? Now, for me personally, when I was younger and at university, I did find Foucault particularly groundbreaking, but I realized that he's not the first thinker to come up with the ideas he did. He's also, through no fault of his own, become the philosopher associated with the prison meme as well. I think we can probably add him to the second. Now, the next one is another person or another philosopher that I came in touch with, which is Max Stirner. A friend of mine lent me the book The Ego and His Own. It's an interesting read. It's pretty crazy. A very good piece on individualism and how you can create, and how capitalism kind of undermines your own individualism. It is associated with the concept of egoistic anarchism, but I'm not sure how much of a fan he would be of that terms, because he tries to negate all of those things. He does come up with the idea of the spook, though, and I quite like the idea of the spook, and we can see him as kind of a godfather to postmodern philosophy. So I think we can put Stirner in the mediocre category, although that image seems to have turned dark, but he's there in the mediocre category. Hegel. You'll know on the channel that we did lectures on Hegel with Sean Ledwith, and Sean is a big fan of Hegel. So Hegel, I think, no debate, is going in the top row. As has been argued, it's hard to go down any philosophical path without bumping into Hegel. So I think for that, we need to place him a groundbreaking, even though his work is rather difficult. Now, the next one is Heidegger. Heidegger's a bit of a controversial one. Brilliant philosopher. Being in Time is a brilliant book. Hopefully I'm going to get around to doing a video on Heidegger at some point. But of course, he was an unapologetic Nazi, which kind of plagues his reputation a little bit, but Being in Time is brilliant. And he's certainly, for people like de Luz, whether they'd admit it or not, for people like de Luz, Foucault, and Derrida, he's certainly a kind of forebearer for that kind of thinking. I'm going to be controversial. I'm going to place Heidegger in the groundbreaking category because I am. Remember, it's just an opinion. Who knows? Who we got next then? So we got Nick Land. Now, Nick Land is a bit of a strange one. I like reading his stuff, but he's very hit and miss in terms of his philosophy. And the stuff I like tends to be based on essays he's done rather than books and huge ideas. Now, Land's work kind of breaks into two categories where you've got the Dark Enlightenment stuff, which I've read, which for me, it doesn't really have like a huge appeal, and I don't think it's really well argued compared to his earlier works in the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit. So Fang Noumena is probably one of the better books that he has. Things like the prohibition of incest that he looks at, counter-revolution, no future, cyber Gothic. The argument that capitalism runs like an AI is an interesting one. So I think we are going to place Nick Land in the poor category. I know he's like often on Twitter. There's a meme on the Nick Land Facebook page where it's along the lines of, "Oh my God, I can't believe Nick Land follows me on Twitter," even though Nick Land seems to follow everyone on Twitter. Maybe Nick Land himself is an AI and just doesn't realize it. Now, the next one, I'm actually a big fan of Nietzsche, and I know that's he kind of gets critiqued on the internet quite a bit by being called like the emo philosopher. Well, as a former emo kid, I'm big into that. And that idea of, everything's pointless, but you should strive and you should seek to create things. His idea of the last man, the Übermensch. Obviously, there are some problems with his writings. He's quite emotive. He's been, again, taken in by the Nazis through partly his fault, but also through no fault of his own. So I think we are going to place Nietzsche in the top tier because I think he is quite useful for living your life. And now the next one is Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre is pretty good, being in nothingness, foundational existentialist philosopher. I think we can. Should I be generous? As he could, the questionings of existence. If we put Camus on that, I think we can probably put Sartre up in the top row. Even though he's kind of building off Nietzsche, I think we can place him in there. But then again, is he still influential? I don't know. I think let's move him down. Let's move him down to good. I wouldn't say he was derivative, but I'd move him down to good just because I think the postmodernists supplant his idea of existentialism quite well. Now, the next one, it looks like we've got Socrates. Socrates is obviously, he's got to be one of the founders of philosophy, but we don't know a lot of what he said. I think we have no option but to put Socrates on the top tier because how can we not? Now, next we've got Kant, as Sean mentioned in the Kant video, greatest of the bourgeois philosophers, idea of the noumena, ethics. Obviously, Nietzsche finds problems with him. Oh, I've also noticed, in the top tier, it's kind of revealed how much of a bias I have towards the German philosophers over the other philosophers. So there you go. Maybe I just like philosophy with application and with practice. Now, Kant, I don't think we have any choice but to place on the groundbreaking role. I think that's pretty difficult. So next, it looks like we've got Spinoza. I remember going to Amsterdam and seeing the statue of Spinoza. Very impressive. I'm a fan of Spinoza. Much like de Luz as well, I think Spinoza's been reappropriated and re-established lately, particularly his metaphysics. So, but in terms of groundbreaking, I mean, he's still kind of been developed and applied in a modern context, so I think I will place him in the good category, even though de Luz does refer to him as the prince of philosophers. I think de Luz appropriates Spinoza probably a lot better than the work itself. Next, it looks like we've got Thomas Hobbes. Now, I quite like Hobbes. I'm not really a big fan of a lot of British philosophers, but Hobbes is certainly up there. And this idea of a war against all, it kind of borrows from various different elements. The Leviathan, of course, influential in liberal and conservative thought. Would I describe him as groundbreaking? Probably not. He's certainly a materialist. I think we can put him in the good category there. Next up, we've got Karl Marx, probably the philosopher that most people have heard about. And I think with a lot of people in the top row, Freud, Kant, Marx, I think most people have heard of him. So very influential philosophy too. reasonably easy to understand his polemical work as opposed to his economic work. His philosophy, should we separate his philosophy from his economics? Are they inseparable? I don't know. I think we can place Marx on the top row as a result. So next it looks like we've got Plato. Again, Plato, foundation of Western philosophy, is going to have to be in the groundbreaking tier in the top there. So again, we've got a mix of Germans and Greeks in that top row now. It's Mill. Not really a big fan of Mill. I know Mill has come back. He seems to be quite popular online, like in Twitter and Reddit. A lot of people seem to like Mill. Personally, not really a huge fan of Mill's philosophy. I do quite like the harm principle, though. I think the harm principle is a really difficult thing to argue with, particularly for libertarian thought, or if you're interested in kind of individuality. So for that, I think we should place him in the mediocre category. Next, we got Mark Fisher. Now, I'm a big fan of Mark Fisher. I think he's really good. I think he writes in a really simple way. I think he also applies the postmodern ideas of Deleuze as well as things like Nick Land and then also Nietzsche really well. I also like my philosophy, contemporary philosophy, with cultural commentary too. I think we can place Nick Land in the great but derivative, as he's kind of within other areas. I guess really he only has 3 key ideas, but he builds on them quite well. So next we've got Locke. Locke, state of nature, liberal thought. I don't know. I think he's kind of mediocre. I understand his kind of state of nature argument and things like that, but not really my cup of tea. Kierkegaard, again, foundational existentialist philosopher, pretty, I'd probably say he's better than Sartre. He got some pretty good quips. I think we can place him in the good category. Who have we got next? So we've got, that looks like Emma Goldman that we've got there. So we could, where could we put Emma Goldman? Emma Goldman's a bit crazy anarchist. She's very critical of the Russian Revolution. In terms of philosophy, though, compared to like the other philosophers on here, I don't know. In comparison to the others, I'm going to, despite her influence and her being quite influential, I think I'm going to put her just on that category with Nick Land. So again, I think she has some really good passages, really good essays. But for me, I just don't think she compares to some of the other people that we've put higher on this list. I feel like I'm doing this on a whim, though. I should have maybe given this more thought. So next, who we got? It looks like Descartes. I think that's Descartes. Now, it's difficult not to place Descartes on the top tier as he kind of starts everything off, even though I think a lot of philosophers nowadays maybe disagree with the cognito ergo sum. He's certainly very popular. I think a lot of people will be aware of him. So I think maybe for that reason, we shall place it on the top category there. What time is it? Oh, I think we can maybe do two more before we finish this off. So next up, we've got Rosa Luxemburg. So Rosa Luxemburg, she actually has some good kind of polemical writings, historically very relevant. But I believe a lot of her philosophical writings were kind of brushed to the side, although her idea of creating a different type of communist society to the one that was created by Lenin and the Soviet Union is still very influential. Compared to the others on the list, yeah, probably put her in kind of the mediocre category compared to the others on the list. If we're judging it as philosophy, maybe because of my Polish heritage, I should have put her a little higher. But there we go. Right, let's do one more and then I'm going to have to go. So the last one, it looks like we've got Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand's not really a philosopher. I know she's been very influential on like libertarian thoughts, influential on maybe people like Jordan Peterson, but I think we've got far better individualist philosophers on this list already. So we've got Nietzsche, for example, who I think is a lot better. Stirner's a lot better. Mill's a lot better. Personally, I'm not a fan of her. I don't even think she's a philosopher, so we'll place her in the garbage section. Right, okay, so I'm going to have to leave it there because that's the end of the break. Hopefully you found that useful. Do you agree with what I've done so far? Let me know below, and I will see you hopefully in the next video.